Do you know who I am? The question wasn't loud, but it fell onto the white tablecloth like the slam of a door. Warm, golden light in Pier View Atelier reflected off the waters of San Francisco Bay outside the windows, painting what should have been a romantic setting for a dinner date. But this wasn't a date. It was an execution. Erin Reyes sat across from the breathtaking woman in a navy blue dress. Her dark hair was neatly tied back, her face cold as ice. He lifted his eyes from the menu, brows furrowing in confusion. "I'm sorry," Erin stammered, his voice off-key. I don't know who you are. This is all—" A flicker of something, suspicion, perhaps even anger, crossed her gaze. She glanced toward the corner table, where mocking laughter spilled out. Erin recognized them instantly. The finance guys from the 38th floor. The ones who always walked past his cleaning cart as if he didn't exist. Trevor Banks raised his phone, the red blink of a recording light winking like a demon's eye. And in that moment, painful to the marrow, Erin understood. This wasn't the date he thought it was. This was a cruel joke, and he was the target. The woman turned back to him, her eyes sharp as blades. "I am Morgan Albright," she said, each word precise and icy. "CEO of Sequoia Bay Capital. The very company where you, Mr. Reyes, are employed as a janitor." The words struck like a slap. Erin's face went pale, blood draining from him. The world tilted. Only one thought filled his mind. He had to leave. "I should go." "No." Morgan's voice wasn't loud, but it was absolute. Her eyes flicked toward Trevor and his pack, her fury almost tangible. "You will sit down. You will order dinner. And you will not give those pathetic boys the satisfaction." Erin looked into her eyes. Behind the mask of a ruthless CEO, he caught a glimpse of a wounded soul, a mother fighting her own ghosts. Slowly, he pulled the chair back and sat down. The joke wasn't over. It had only just begun. And none of them knew that night would change all their lives. That a single sugar packet and a drop of water could unlock the door to a miracle. That, from a cruel prank, the most beautiful love would take root. But to understand, we must rewind 8 hours earlier, where it all began with a single lie. If you believe stories like this deserve to be shared, hit subscribe to True Tale Time right now so you don't miss the next journey. And have you ever thought, a prank that seemed harmless could change someone's entire life? It all began with a lie at 8 o'clock in the morning. Erin Reyes was carefully polishing the massive glass doors in the main lobby of Sequoia Bay Capital. The scent of lemon from the cleaning solution filled the air, blending with the lingering San Francisco fog on the glass, creating blurred reflections of a city just waking up. "Reyes!" Trevor Banks's voice rang out from behind. Erin startled slightly. In the 3 years he had worked there, no one from the 38th floor had ever spoken to him. Trevor walked closer, his smirk like that of a predator. "Tonight is going to be a big night for you, my friend." Erin simply nodded and kept working. He was used to being invisible. It was the safest way to survive. Another man chimed in. "We think you're a good guy. Hardworking, discreet. You deserve a chance." Trevor leaned fully against the reception desk. "There's a girl in accounting. Smart, beautiful, but a little shy. She's had her eye on you. We'll set up a blind date. Everything's taken care of." Erin froze. He was 34 years old. His life revolved around his 7-year-old daughter, Isla, and the steady, predictable rhythm of night shifts. Dating wasn't something he had put aside. It was something he had cut out of his life entirely. "I don't think so," he replied politely, "but thank you." "Oh, come on," Trevor pressed, his grin widening. Aren't you lonely? Peer View Atelier, 8 o'clock tonight. A table for 2 is already waiting. Don't keep her waiting. 3 more refusals, but they persisted, turning it into a favor he would be rude not to accept. And a seed, a thought he had buried for years, began to stir. Maybe, just once, wouldn't hurt. When he got back to their small apartment that evening, Isla was sitting at the kitchen table, carefully coloring in a unicorn. She looked up, her bright eyes so much like her mother's. It made his chest ache, as it always did. "Daddy, you look worried," she said, with the uncanny perceptiveness of a 7-year-old. He tried to smile. "Some people at work arranged for me to meet a new friend." Isla's face lit up. "A friend? Is she pretty?" "Daddy doesn't know, sweetheart. He hasn't met her yet." "You should go," Isla declared, then leapt off her chair. She ran to their tiny wardrobe and pulled out his only dress shirt, the dark gray one he had bought for his wife's funeral, which he hadn't worn since. "Wear this. It makes your eyes look like the sky. That innocence was the final push." For his daughter, Aaron wanted to be more than a tired janitor. He wanted to believe he still deserved something good, but he had no idea that only a few miles away, inside a penthouse on the 45th floor of 181 Fremont, another conversation was taking place, thick with suspicion. "A blind date, Trevor?" Morgan Albright said into the phone, her eyes still fixed on the quarterly report on her tablet. "I don't have time for that nonsense." Her daughter, 5-year-old Maya, sat on the floor, carefully stacking wooden blocks into a perfect tower. Silent. Always silent. "He's the perfect choice, Morgan," Trevor insisted. "A self-made businessman, built his company from the ground up, just like you. Smart, ambitious, and he asked about you after seeing your Forbes feature." Morgan sighed. It had been a year since her husband walked out. A year drowning in work, and even more brutal, a year of her daughter's silence. Every specialist had said the same thing. The trauma of abandonment had stolen Maya's voice. Once again, Morgan swallowed the familiar ache of despair. Maybe one night out was exactly what she needed. A brief moment to be a woman, not just a CEO or a failed mother. "Fine," she cut him off, her voice sharp. "One drink, no more." But just as she was about to leave, the babysitter called to cancel at the last minute because of an emergency. Morgan turned to Maya, those wide eyes holding everything her lips could not say. She couldn't leave her daughter behind, yet she couldn't endure another suffocating night in the silent apartment. Morgan decided she would take Maya along. Just one drink. What could possibly happen? Peer View Atelier sat along the Embarcadero. Its giant windows opened to sweeping views of the San Francisco Bay, golden lights shimmering across the water, a perfect backdrop for a romantic date. Aaron arrived right at 8. His hands trembled slightly as he gave his name to the hostess. Dressed in his old suit and the gray shirt Isla had chosen, he felt out of place in this world of elegance, where glasses clinked lightly, polite laughter mingled with the soft jazz drifting from a piano in the corner. The woman was already there, and for a fleeting moment, Aaron felt the world stop. She was breathtaking, her dark hair neatly tied back, a simple yet elegant navy blue dress. But it wasn't her beauty that froze him. It was her eyes, cold as ice, carrying a frighteningly familiar weight. "Do you know who I am?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it fell onto the white tablecloth between them like a heavy door slamming shut. Aaron looked up from the menu, frowning in confusion. "I'm sorry. I don't think so." "Should I?" A flicker of disbelief, maybe anger, flashed across her face. Morgan glanced over his shoulder toward a table where a few men in suits were struggling to stifle their laughter. Aaron's stomach tightened. He recognized them instantly. They were the CFOs from the 38th floor, the men who always passed by his cleaning cart as if he didn't exist. One of them, Trevor Banks, held up his phone, pretending to check messages. The red light of the camera blinked, and in that instant, Aaron understood. This wasn't a date. This was an execution. The woman's icy gaze returned to him. I am the CEO of Sequoia Bay Capital, the company where you, Mr. Reyes, are employed as a janitor. Aaron felt the blood drain from his face. He pushed his chair back, one thought blazing in his mind. Escape. I should go. No. Morgan's reply was soft but absolute. Her eyes locked on Trevor's table, fury radiating like a tangible force. You will sit. You will order dinner. And you will not give those pathetic boys the satisfaction. At that moment, a small figure appeared beside Morgan. It was Maya, her daughter, who had been seated at a table near the entrance with the server. Next to Maya stood Isla, her wide, round eyes sparkling with excitement. Aaron's sister had brought Isla along, thinking the date would be brief. Mommy, I'm hungry, Maya whispered, though no sound came out. Instead, it was the familiar gestures of her tiny hands, a silent language that had become the pain both mother and daughter carried. Isla was different. The silence didn't faze her at all. She beamed at Maya. Hi, I'm Isla. Your mom is really pretty. My dad's handsome too, isn't he? Aaron's heart cracked open. He looked at Morgan, the CEO he had only ever seen from a distance, and suddenly she wasn't a cold queen anymore. She was a mother carrying a pain he knew all too well, down to his very bones. Slowly, Aaron pulled his chair back in and sat down. The joke wasn't over. It had only just begun. The waiter approached, deliberately ignoring the muffled snickers from the corner table. Good evening. What would you like to start with? Morgan didn't even glance at him. Her eyes stayed pinned on Trevor's table, silently promising revenge. I'll have sparkling water. 2 Shirley Temples for the girls. Then she turned to Aaron, her voice low but carrying the weight of command. And you, Mr. Reyes, what will you drink? Addressing him formally by his surname was a wall, a blatant reminder of the divide. He was an employee. She was the boss. This was no date. Just water, Aaron murmured, setting down the menu. He had no intention of ordering anything he couldn't afford. Not here, not under these circumstances. Isla, oblivious, swung her legs happily. Daddy, can I have cherries? 2 of them, please. Of course, sweetheart. Aaron forced a smile, straining to keep his voice warm. When the drinks arrived, silence settled over them once more. A heavy, suffocating silence. Aaron could feel the weight of Trevor's gaze from across the room, waiting for the moment he crumbled. For Morgan to cut him down with an icy remark, for him to bow his head and leave in shame. But she did nothing. Morgan sat tall, regal as a queen on a battlefield, utterly dismissing her enemies. It was Isla who broke the tension. She leaned toward Maya, whispering as though sharing a secret. My favorite color is glitter. What about you? Maya looked at her, those wide dark eyes luminous with intelligence, far older than her years. Her lips parted, as if she might let out a sound, but immediately pressed shut again. She dropped her gaze, her tiny hands clenched tightly in her lap. A flicker of frustration crossed her small face. Maya gripped her fork, her fingers blanching, then lifted her eyes to her mother with a pleading look. She likes blue, Morgan said softly, her voice gentler now, tinged with sorrow and weariness. And she wants to know if your dress has pockets. For secrets. Isla giggled. It does. To keep secrets safe. Then she turned back to Maya, speaking softly. It's okay if you don't want to talk yet. I get shy too, but Aaron knew. This wasn't shyness. It was a locked door, and only Maya held the key. He saw the shimmer of a tear at the corner of her eye, sliding silently down her cheek. That was enough. He couldn't just sit there and watch. The humiliation of being made into a joke was one thing, but the silent pain of a child, that was something he couldn't ignore. The instinct of a father, buried beneath 3 years of grief, flared back to life. Aaron leaned forward. He was no longer a therapist. He was only a father. But the memories of his training remained. He took a sugar packet from the ceramic bowl in the center of the table, tore a small corner, and sprinkled a few white grains across the dark wood, arranging them into the shape of a tiny star. Then he dipped his finger into his glass of water and let a round droplet fall right beside it. Look, Maya, his voice was soft as a breath. A wishing star and a magic moon. Isla gasped with delight. Maya lifted her eyes, wide with surprise rather than sadness. Aaron avoided direct eye contact, knowing it might overwhelm her. He kept his focus on the table, nudging the droplet gently until it touched the sugar star. Instantly, the star melted into a sparkling swirl. The moon hugs the star, he whispered, and the wish stays safe inside. Maya's eyes lit up. For the first time, Aaron saw her beyond the wall of silence. Her lips curved into a shy smile. Then she looked at the sugar bowl, then back at him, her gaze asking a question without words. Aaron slid the bowl gently toward her. Maya hesitated, then reached for a packet and set it back in front of him. It was an invitation, a silent request. Morgan saw it all, her hand frozen on her glass, her face drained of color. She had spent millions of dollars on the world's top specialists in psychology, behavioral science, neurology, and they had given her charts, tools, sterile sessions, but none of them had made her daughter smile. None of them had reached Maya. And yet, this man, a mere janitor, the butt of her employee's cruel joke, had broken through the wall with nothing but a sugar packet and a drop of water. The rest of dinner passed like a dream. Morgan insisted on ordering, her tone leaving no room for objection. The two girls ate happily, while Aaron and Maya continued their silent game, creating constellations, galaxies dissolving across the tabletop. The mocking laughter from the corner table had long since vanished, replaced by whispers of confusion and anger. Their perfect joke had failed. As they rose to leave, Morgan's eyes met Aaron's. The ice had cracked, revealing something he couldn't name: raw intensity and despair. In the marble lobby, while Isla chattered on the phone with her aunt about the magic moon, Morgan pulled Aaron aside. The experts call it selective mutism from trauma, she whispered. They say there's no cure, only methods, and none of them have worked. She stepped closer. I've paid millions to the best doctors in the world, and none of them did what you just did in a single minute. So, who are you, really? Aaron felt the walls closing in again. Her praise, her pleading eyes. It was a sentence, dragging him back to the man he used to be, and the man who had failed when it mattered most. I'm just the guy who cleans your lobby. That's all. His voice was flat. Morgan's eyes narrowed. The CEO returned, cold and commanding. I don't believe you. You will help my daughter. It wasn't a request. It was an order. A spark of defiance flashed in Aaron's chest. Years of pain and helplessness condensed into strength. He looked straight at the powerful woman before him. the one who thought she could command the world, and gave her the one answer she never expected. "No." The word slipped out, soft but resolute. "I can't help her. I'm just a janitor, remember? That part of my life is over." And with that, he took Isla's hand and walked out into the cold San Francisco night, leaving the billionaire CEO standing stunned and alone in the warm golden glow of Pierview Atelier. Morgan Albright was not the kind of person who got refused. That word simply did not exist in her vocabulary. In the boardroom, at the negotiating table, even in her personal life, no one said no to her. They yielded. They agreed. They bowed before the absolute force of her will. She sat in the back seat of the chauffeured car, the city lights beyond the tinted window reduced to meaningless smears. And that word, soft, quiet, kept echoing in her mind. No. Annoying, puzzling, and worst of all, frightening. In those few brief, miraculous moments at the restaurant that night, watching the janitor play with her daughter, she had felt something she hadn't dared to touch for a year. Hope. It was fragile, unfamiliar. And now he had yanked it out of her hands, leaving only the heavy cold of despair. He had cracked open a door for Maya, just a sliver, then slammed it shut right in front of her. She would not accept that. She could not. In their small third-floor apartment, the sweet scent of cinnamon bread filled the air as Aaron tucked a blanket over Isla. "Daddy," the little girl whispered, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Can we see Maya again?" "She's really nice." Aaron's chest tightened. "We'll see, sweetheart." Tonight was complicated. "But you made her smile," Isla said, a mix of pride and drowsiness in her voice. "You used your magic." Sarah, his wife, used to call it that, his magic, the way he could sit beside the shyest, most wounded children and find a way into their world. He had built an acclaimed career on that magic. He had once been a healer. But when Sarah fell ill, that magic was helpless. He couldn't coax the cancer out of her body. He couldn't heal dying cells with gentle words or patient games. He sat by her bed for months, watching the brightest light of his life fade. And all his skill, all his empathy, were meaningless. After she died, the thought of healing anyone else became a kind of hypocrisy. He couldn't fix what was truly broken. So he left the profession, packed up his life, and found a job where no one would ask him to perform miracles. He kissed Isla's forehead. "It's not magic, sweetheart. Just a little game." But when he stepped into the living room and looked at the single-framed photo on the mantel, Sarah smiling, holding a tiny Isla, he felt the ghosts of his old life crowd in. Meeting Morgan and Maya had ripped open a scar he thought had healed. That no in the dark lobby had not been a stand against a CEO. It had been panic, a desperate attempt to keep the ghosts of failure locked away in the past. 2 days later, the air at Sequoia Bay Capitol was thick with tension. News of the CEO's disastrous blind date had spread like wildfire. Aaron kept his head down, pushing his cleaning cart through gleaming, empty corridors. The squeak of the rubber wheels was the only sound. He felt the covert stares by the hundred, even from behind closed doors. As he passed Trevor Banks's office, the door swung open. Trevor leaned against the frame, a sneer hanging on his lips. "Well, well," he drawled. "Look what the cat dragged in. Heard you had quite a night, Reyes. Rubbing elbows with the elite, huh? How's it feel to be back in the gutter where you belong?" Aaron kept pushing the cart, his jaw clenched. "Excuse me, Mr. Banks. I need to mop this floor." Trevor's smile faltered. He'd expected a man crumbling with shame. So why hadn't Morgan fired him already? The joke wasn't following the script. and that made him restless. An hour later, Aaron was on the 48th floor, the West Executive Wing, always as silent as a museum. He was wiping down the massive oak conference table when the door clicked shut behind him. He turned. Morgan Albright stood there, arms folded. She had shed her severe suit for black slacks and a soft gray sweater. Without the office armor, she looked younger and infinitely tired. "I've reviewed your HR file," she said, her voice stripped of earlier anger. Only a cold, flat calm remained. "It's flat, analytical, like a ghost. 3 years in custodial management. Before that, warehouse work in Ohio. Before that, nothing. A history constructed with great care by a man determined to disappear." Aaron turned back to his work. "That's my history." "I don't care about your history." She stepped closer, slowly. "I care about my daughter." She didn't smile for a year, Mr. Reyes. 1 year. And last night, when I put her to bed, she took a sugar packet from the kitchen, a glass of water, and played your game. She played for an hour. She was happy Aaron's hand paused, but he didn't look at her. He didn't dare. "I'll pay," Morgan said plainly. "Name your price. Whatever it is, I'll pay. Consultation fees. I'll sign a contract right now. 1 hour a day. A week's pay equal to a year of what you make here." That was her world, where everything, even hope, had a price. At last, Aaron looked up. The look in his eyes made her recoil half a step without thinking. In it was an unfathomable, bottomless pain. "You think this is about money?" His voice caught, years of pent-up grief breaking loose. "You think writing a check fixes my past? The last time I poured out my soul to save someone I loved, I was holding her hand when she died." His fingers whitened around the spray bottle. "I'm not a healer anymore. I'm a janitor, and your money can't buy a miracle." He pushed the cart past her and left the conference room, leaving Morgan alone amid the echoing quiet, the faint lemon polish in the air, and her checkbook suddenly useless. Sunday afternoon was bright and sunny. Aaron sat on a bench in Golden Gate Park, holding an old book, his eyes following Isla as she whirled around on the carousel. Her laughter rang like silver bells. In the sunlight, the lines of weariness on his face softened, replaced by the gentle focus of a father. He looked like a man who had found peace. Morgan found the two of them easily. She dressed herself and Maya in jeans and sweaters, things they had forgotten to wear for a long time. As the car stopped at the edge of the park, she felt like an imposter in a place of simple things, where the air was thick with the cheerful sounds of everyday life. Maya stood beside her, clutching her mother's hand, watching the other children with that familiar, aching longing. Isla saw them first. The carousel slowed and stopped. She hopped down, her braids flying. "Maya!" she squealed, her voice bursting with honest joy. "You came to the park!" Maya shyly raised a hand to wave. "Want to go to the swings?" Isla took Maya's free hand. "My dad pushes really high, almost to the clouds." Maya looked up at her mother, eyes wide, a wordless plea. Morgan nodded, her throat tight. "Go on, sweetheart." She watched Isla lead Maya toward the swings. Aaron had already looked up, the book forgotten in his hand. When he saw Morgan, the peace fell from his face, replaced by taut wariness. He stood and walked toward her, stopping a few paces away. "What are you doing here, Ms. Albright?" "My daughter wanted to go to the park," Morgan replied evenly. Not entirely a lie. "This is a big city," he said coolly. "Plenty of parks." "But this park has a carousel." She lifted her gaze to meet his, discarding all pretense. "I didn't come to hand you money. I didn't come to give orders." She pointed toward the swings, where Isla chattered away, and Maya still sat motionless, watching. I came because my daughter is trapped inside herself. And you, for reasons I cannot begin to fathom, have the key. I saw it. She saw it. Since that night, she hasn't stopped looking for sugar packets. Aaron's expression softened as he watched the two girls. He saw Isla gently press a hand to Maya's back, coaxing patiently. He saw a flicker of a smile cross Maya's face, not yet on her lips, but bright in her eyes. And he saw a profound loneliness, a silence that made the chest ache, so familiar it stung. I told you, he said softly, almost pleading. I can't. Morgan rose. The last veneer of composure cracked. The daily, gnawing desperation now flooded through every wall she had built. Why? She whispered, her voice trembling with a mother's pain. Because you're afraid? So am I. I'm terrified. I'm afraid I will never hear my little girl's voice again. That she will grow up in a world where she cannot say, I love you, I'm scared, or even her own name. She looked toward Maya, then back at him, eyes shining with unshed tears. Please, don't do it for me. Do it for her. Aaron followed her gaze. He saw his own daughter, full of light and laughter, and he saw Maya, a reflection in many ways, but locked in darkness. The hard refusal, the walls he had built from grief, began to crumble to dust. The silence between them thickened with the afternoon sun and the distant peals of children's laughter. For 3 years, he had built a fortress around his heart, constructed from sorrow and plastered with the belief that he was broken beyond repair. But the wordless plea of a 5-year-old girl proved stronger than any rampart he had ever raised. The walls fell. At last, he let out a long, trembling breath, as if he had been holding it since the day Sarah was gone. All right, he said. The word was light, fragile. I agree. 2 nights later, Aaron stood awkwardly at the marble-tiled entrance of Morgan Albright's penthouse. The vast apartment was minimalist and hushed. It looked more like a modern art museum than a home. A world of clean lines and cold surfaces made him feel utterly out of place in his work jeans and faded hoodie. From the enormous windows on the 45th floor of 181 Fremont, all of San Francisco stretched below. The Bay Bridge shimmering like a strand of pearls, hills spilling with pastel houses, the dark bay reflecting the city lights. Morgan led him into the open-plan living room. Maya sat on the luxurious white rug, surrounded by a mountain of expensive educational toys, none of which had been touched. She looked up when Aaron entered, her gaze wary. "We can work here," Morgan said, her tone a touch too bright, like a hostess trying to smooth over an awkward dinner party. "I'll be in the kitchen. Call if you need anything." Aaron nodded, his heart thudding. Self-doubt roared in his ears like something tangible. What am I doing here? I can't do this anymore. I'm going to let this child down. He knelt on the rug, keeping a few steps distance from Maya, careful not to enter her space too quickly. He didn't look at the toys. He didn't look at her. He simply sat, letting the silence settle. From the corner of his eye, he saw Morgan drifting around the kitchen island, fingers laced, her anxious hope for a miracle radiating through the room. Aaron knew, as long as she stood there broadcasting that plea, Maya would not feel safe enough to step out. Finally, he looked up at Morgan. "Could you give us the room?" he asked softly. Morgan blinked, like someone caught in the act. "Oh, of course. I just thought—" "It will be better if she doesn't feel watched," Aaron explained. "Her silence is a shield. She won't lower it if she senses she's being tested." For the first time since the night at the restaurant, he spoke with the calm authority of his former self. Morgan, who was used to controlling every situation, found herself nodding obediently. She retreated to the office at the end of the hall, leaving the door slightly ajar. For 20 minutes, Aaron did nothing but breathe. He sat on the floor, simply sharing space with Maya. No prompts, no invitations to play. Only this, letting her know he required nothing of her. Slowly, he reached into the small canvas tote he had brought and took out 2 items, a smooth pebble and a blue crayon. He doodled lazily on the stone, concentrating wholly on the task. A simple, smiley face emerged. He set the stone down between them on the white rug. Maya's eyes flicked downward. Aaron took out another pebble and offered her a red crayon. He said nothing, returning to his own stone, this time sketching a slightly crooked star. Maya watched for a long time. Then, slowly, as if afraid to break something fragile, her small hand reached out, picked up the red crayon. She didn't draw on the stone. Instead, she began to draw on the back of Aaron's hand. A trembling red line. A connection. Aaron didn't startle. He let her finish, his hand motionless. It was the smallest of breakthroughs. A silent conversation in the language of color and trust. In the weeks that followed, the sessions became a quiet ritual amid their chaotic lives. Twice a week, Aaron came to the penthouse after his shift. The scent of industrial cleaner still clung to his clothes. There were no loud miracles, but there was progress, slow, steady, like a sprout pushing up through frozen soil. Maya began using the pebbles to tell stories. A sad-faced stone placed far from the group of smiling stones, a red line connecting a small stone to a larger one. It was a language Aaron gradually learned to read. He came to understand. She felt lonely at school. She missed the dog they had before her father left. She was afraid of the dark. While Aaron sat with Maya, Morgan stayed in the kitchen pretending to work on her laptop. But in truth, she was listening. She wasn't listening for words. She was listening to the quality of the silence. Before Aaron, the silence in her home had been a heavy blanket, weighted by absence. Now, the silence in the living room was different. Dynamic, expressive, full of trust. Between sessions, the 2 adults' conversations began, shyly, in the minutes before and after the work. "She seems to like drawing a house," Aaron said one evening as he packed his bag. "There's always a window and someone looking out." Morgan leaned against the doorframe, a warm cup of tea in her hands. "That's her father's studio. He's a painter. She used to sit and watch him work for hours." It was the first time she had mentioned her ex-husband without a trace of bitterness. Another night, Aaron arrived a few minutes late. "Sorry," he sighed, looking drained. "Today is my wife's death anniversary. Isla had trouble sleeping." "Tell me about her," Morgan asked softly, surprised at her own candor. Aaron looked down at the smooth pebble in his hand. "Sarah?" She was light. She believed everyone carries a song inside them, if only the world is quiet enough to hear it. She would know what to do with Maya. She wouldn't need any tricks. In those quiet confessions, the vast distance between CEO and janitor began to narrow. He saw the vulnerable woman beneath the corporate armor. She saw the gifted, wounded man beneath the custodial uniform. In the end, they were simply 2 single parents, fumbling their way across an ocean of sorrow to build a safe harbor for their children. Trevor Banks could not stand the feeling of powerlessness. He noticed the subtle change in the CEO, a new lightness to her step. He saw how she sometimes dismissed the driver and walked away from the building toward the rougher neighborhood where the janitor lived. He didn't know exactly what was happening, but he knew Reyes was in it. And that meant a threat. It was time to remove this piece from the board, permanently. The plan was simple and cruel. Trevor waited for a night he knew senior partner Abernathy worked late. Abernathy was notorious for fussing over his possessions, especially the antique gold fountain pen, an heirloom worth thousands of dollars that always sat on his desk. While Aaron was cleaning on another floor, Trevor slipped into Abernathy's office and pocketed the pen. Not wanting to stain his own hands, he had his subordinate, Liam Ortega, handle the final step. He handed the pen to Liam with instructions. Use the duplicated master key to open the janitor's locker and tuck the pen deep into the pocket of the old coat. When it was done, Trevor placed an anonymous call to security, reporting that he had seen the night shift janitor acting suspiciously near Abernathy's office. An hour later, as Aaron was clocking out, 2 uniformed guards approached. Leading them was Henderson, who usually greeted him with a nod. Now his face was stern. "Mr. Reyes," Henderson said, official and clipped, "we need you to come with us." "What's going on?" Aaron's heart hammered. "There's been a theft reported in the executive wing. A valuable item is missing from Mr. Abernathy's office. We're required to search all employees on shift." A chill crawled up his spine. Wrong. This was a trap. "Stolen? I haven't seen anything. It's just procedure, Aaron," the second guard said more gently. "We'll get this over with quickly." They led him to the janitorial room. Aaron opened his locker, his hands steady despite his racing pulse. The guards rummaged inside, a spare shirt, an old paperback, then the coat. A hand slid into the pocket. Fingers touched something hard and cold. The guard pulled out the gold fountain pen. Under the fluorescent lights, it gleamed, the evidence of guilt. Henderson held up the pen. "How do you explain this, Mr. Reyes?" Aaron stared at it, his mind spinning. He had never seen it in his life. He looked from the pen to the guards' impassive faces and saw the jaws of the trap closing. In his mind, Trevor's face appeared, smiling in victory. "That's not mine," he said hoarsely. "I don't know how it got in there." Henderson's face hardened. "Everyone says that," he sighed, pulling out zip ties. "You'll have to come with us." "Mr. Abernathy is on his way down. He'll want to press charges." Aaron sat in the small, windowless security room in the basement. The stolen pen lay on the metal table before him like a verdict. The air smelled of stale coffee. But what Aaron didn't know was this. On the 45th floor of 181 Fremont, Morgan Albright stood by the window of her home office, waiting for him. When 9 o'clock came and went with no word, she called down to security. What she heard made her blood turn to ice. "Caught the thief?" Morgan repeated over the phone, her voice suddenly dangerous. "Mr. Henderson, I'm coming down right now." She snapped her laptop shut and rushed out of the apartment, leaving Maya asleep with the babysitter. As the elevator sped down to the basement, her thoughts raced at the speed of light. Aaron Reyes, the man who had refused a life-changing sum of money, had suddenly become a thief? Nonsense. Entering the security office, she saw Aaron seated beside a small metal table, pale but composed. Abernathy, face flushed, expensive suit, was jabbing a trembling finger at him. "That's him!" he roared. "A thief! I want him arrested and fully prosecuted. The nerve! Stealing my family heirloom." Henderson tried to soothe him. "Sir, we're following procedure." "What procedure?" Abernathy blustered. "He was caught red-handed." "Call the police now." "That won't be necessary, Philip." The voice from the doorway was hard as steel. Morgan Albright stood there, still in her work clothes, arms folded. Her absolute authority froze the room into silence. Abernathy's jaw snapped shut. Henderson stood as straight as if saluting a head of state. "Morgan," Abernathy stammered, "this is a security matter. This man is my employee." And therefore it is my matter, she cut in, eyes on Aaron. You may go, Philip. Mr. Henderson and I will handle it. Her tone offered no suggestion. It was an order. Abernathy fumed a few seconds more, then deflated, nodded, and hurried out. Morgan's gaze softened as she looked at Aaron. Are you all right? He only nodded, his throat too tight to speak. She turned to Henderson. Walk me through it. Every step Henderson recounted it. The anonymous call, the search, the pen found. When he finished, the room fell into silence. Absurd, Morgan murmured, almost to herself. She looked to Aaron. I offered this man a life-changing sum, and he refused. Tell me, Henderson, why would someone like that steal a pen? The head of security had no answer. Check the cameras, Morgan ordered. All cameras on the 40th floor and in the janitorial area for the last 3 hours. Now, for the next hour, the three of them sat in the dim monitoring room, bluish screens washing their faces. They fast-forwarded through hours of footage until only blurred figures slid by. They saw Aaron working by the book, meticulous. They saw Abernathy leave his office. Nothing suspicious. Nothing, Ms. Albright, Henderson began, impatient. Keep looking. Morgan narrowed her eyes, focusing. Find the person who shouldn't be there. Then she saw it. A flicker of movement near the janitorial lockers, while Aaron was on another floor. Stop. Rewind. Zoom in on the corridor. The video slowed. A figure stepped out of the shadows. Not Trevor. It was his right-hand man, junior analyst Liam Ortega. He glanced along the empty hall, then slipped into the unlocked locker. Inside for less than 10 seconds. What time? Morgan asked. 22:47. Henderson read the timestamp. Give me the log of the anonymous call. Henderson typed quickly. The line appeared. Anonymous call reporting suspicious activity on the 40th floor. 22:51. 4 minutes after Liam left the locker. That's enough. Morgan's voice was quiet, a blade in its sheath. She stood. Henderson, release Mr. Reyes immediately, and apologize properly. The investigation ends here. She walked Aaron to the elevator. The silence between them was heavy with things unsaid. As the doors closed, the car became their private space. Aaron finally found his voice. Thank you, he whispered. Every word felt small. They were about to call the police. I didn't know what to do. You don't have to do anything, she turned to him. I know you didn't do it. How do you know? Because I know who you are, Aaron. Her voice gentled. You're the man who used a sugar packet to make a little girl smile. The man who talks about his late wife as if she's still the sun in his sky. You're not a thief. The raw, unconditional faith in her voice hit him harder than any accusation. In that moment, she wasn't the boss. She was the only person who truly saw him, saw the man beneath the uniform and the grief. The elevator chimed. The lobby. The doors slid open. Aaron didn't move, only looked at her. Something nameless rising in his chest. Gratitude, relief, and a warmth that was frightening because it was so new. Morgan, he began, voice thick. Go home, Aaron, she said softly, her eyes glistening too. Go to your daughter. He nodded and stepped out. He turned back once more. Their eyes met and held. A silent current. Very strong. The failed frame-up changed everything. Trevor Banks was left twisting in the wind, while Liam Ortega was fired for gross misconduct. Morgan did not dismiss Trevor, a punishment far crueler. She left him sitting there, stripped of projects and responsibilities, a ghost in a glass cage for all to see. For Aaron and Morgan, the incident burned away all pretense. That crisis forged a trust thick enough to touch. Their friendship, born in the silence of Maya's sessions, now began to bloom in daylight. Morgan insisted on having Aaron and Isla over for Saturday dinner. Not a fancy restaurant, but right there in the formerly sterile penthouse she was awkwardly trying to turn into a home. They ate pizza on the floor, a shock to penthouse protocol. Isla and Maya built a fortress out of sofa cushions and expensive throw blankets. For the first time, Aaron heard Morgan truly laugh, the sound so clear it surprised even her. It began when Isla balanced a black olive on her nose and solemnly declared herself a unicorn. When the two girls fell asleep in the fortress, Aaron and Morgan stepped out onto the balcony. The city below glittered like fallen constellations. "I never do things like this," Morgan said with a small laugh, gesturing toward the charming mess inside. "Sitting. Relaxing. My life is a string of appointments." "Mine too," Aaron admitted. "Work, sleep, make sure Isla eats her vegetables." A tight loop. "Is that enough?" she asked, her voice soft and sincere. He was quiet for a long while, watching the stream of headlights like a thin river. "It's enough when she's happy," he said. "That's all that matters." He looked at her. "You understand that better than anyone." In that moment, the space between them shimmered with possibility. He was no longer a janitor. She was no longer a CEO. Just a man and a woman who had found an anchor in each other amid the storm. 3 weeks after the frame-up, the miracle happened. Aaron sat on the floor with Maya as usual. They made galaxies from sugar and water. Maya was more confident now. Sometimes she produced small sounds, not yet words, but progress. Morgan sat in the kitchen, pretending to read reports, truly observing. She saw her daughter laugh, a real laugh, when Aaron sent a giant sugar comet sliding across the table. Then, as the late sunlight poured through the enormous windows, turning sugar dust into tiny diamonds, Maya looked straight into Aaron's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. The voice was small, trembling, but it was a word. Her voice. Aaron went still. Morgan dropped her stack of reports, her hand flying to her mouth. Maya turned toward her mother, her eyes shining with something Aaron had never seen. Hope. "Mom," the girl said, stronger this time. "Mom, look." Morgan lurched up so fast the chair flipped. She ran over, knelt, and hugged her child tight. "You spoke." Morgan burst into tears, the flood breaking. "Maya, you spoke." "I missed you," Maya whispered into her mother's shoulder. "I missed you so much." But the words were stuck. Aaron stood there, witnessing the reunion, his own eyes wet. He felt something in his chest, the cold slab of ice he had carried for 3 years, begin to melt. He was not a failure. He could heal. His magic had returned. But Trevor Banks was quietly preparing his final strike. He saw the changes. Morgan's lighter step, the quick smile she wore when she thought no one was looking. He heard the whispers about evenings at the penthouse, about an undeniable connection in bloom. It was time to drag everything into the light. On Tuesday morning, the email went out. A mandatory all-hands town hall on Friday afternoon. Official topic: third quarter results and a new strategic initiative. The unofficial topic spread through break rooms and message threads. The CEO's judgment. Trevor's insinuations had taken root. Rumors blazed about Morgan's erratic behavior and an inappropriate relationship with a janitor. The town hall was the spark point. Aaron was assigned to support the event. One more invisible uniform among dozens, checking badges, guiding attendees into the state-of-the-art auditorium. He caught the looks. Pity, disdain. He had become a character in the office rumor mill's meat grinder. He stood at the back of the hall, leaning against the wall as the room filled. He saw the board members take the front row, faces grave. Then he saw Morgan step onto the stage. She was strong and composed in a charcoal suit, but Aaron still noticed the tension in her shoulders. Their eyes met for a heartbeat across the sea of people. An unspoken acknowledgement. "I'm here." The meeting began. The CFO droned on about revenue and margins. The vice president of marketing played a glossy video about the new initiative. Everyone was waiting. At last, the Q&A opened. A few soft questions came and went. Then Aaron saw him. Trevor Banks strode confidently to the aisle microphone. He looked straight at Morgan, his face wearing a mask of counterfeit sincerity. Here it was, the final confrontation. "Morgan, thank you for your leadership," Trevor began, his voice smooth as silk, carrying across the auditorium. "My question comes from a concern I believe is shared by many of us who have devoted our lives to this company." He paused, letting the drama build. "Lately, we've seen inconsistency, a lack of focus. We've heard rumors of distractions, relationships that suggest troubling lapses in judgment." A shocked murmur rippled outward. This was open revolt. Trevor's eyes swept to the back of the hall, searching for Aaron in the shadows. The corner of his mouth twitched into a barely concealed, spiteful smile. He turned back to Morgan, his voice dripping with contempt. "So how are we, employees and shareholders, supposed to trust the future of this company when the CEO is displaying poor judgment and consorting with a service worker?" The words landed like a punch. The murmurs died. Silence, heavy as lead, settled over the room. Hundreds of eyes shifted from Trevor to Morgan, standing alone under the harsh lights. The board members stared straight ahead, avoiding her gaze. Aaron felt the blood drain from his face, his hands clenched uselessly at his sides. Morgan stood still for a long beat, her face pale, unreadable. The silence stretched to the edge of unbearable. She looked at Trevor. Then her gaze swept the sea of motionless faces. Finally, it came to rest on Aaron at the back of the room. A slow smile touched her lips. Strange, sorrowful, and incredibly powerful. Not the smile of a CEO cornered, but of a woman who had just found the perfect weapon. She leaned toward the microphone. "Thank you, Trevor," she said, her voice calm and clear to every corner of the room. "Thank you for your concern. Judgment, after all, is what I am paid to exercise. So, allow me to tell everyone a story about judgment." She paused, looking at the audience, the board, and finally back to Trevor, who was starting to lose his composure. "In the past year," she continued, her voice shedding its corporate timbre and becoming intimate human, "many of you have probably noticed I've been distracted. Yes, I have. Because for 365 days, my 5-year-old daughter, Maya, did not speak a word. Not a single word, a collective sharp intake of breath. The story was too personal, too out of place in a sterile corporate setting, and thus utterly compelling. Her father left, Morgan went on, her voice still steady and clear, though Aaron saw her hand tremble. In that wreckage, my child's voice became a casualty. I assessed the situation. I threw money at it. I hired the top experts. She looked directly at Trevor. They came with their doctorates and their theories. They diagnosed selective mutism. They poked, prodded, tested, and all they accomplished was to drive her silence deeper. Another intake of breath, louder, sharper. Then, a few weeks ago, some of my employees, in a spectacular lapse of judgment, thought it would be amusing to set me up on a blind date with the company's janitor. It was a cruel joke, a humiliation, Morgan said, her voice ringing out like a hammer striking a nail. And the man at the center of that joke had every right to walk away. But he didn't. He stayed, he looked at my daughter, who was with me, and he didn't see a case file. He saw a lonely little girl. Her eyes drifted toward the back of the room, searching for Aaron in the dark. He had no doctorate, no theories. He had a sugar packet. And with that sugar packet, he made my daughter smile for the first time in a year. The room held its breath. No one coughed. No one moved. I learned that this janitor, the man many of you consider invisible, was once one of the most respected pediatric speech therapists in the country. A man who healed children with his gift. On many faces in the audience, tears began to fall. The board members lowered their eyes to their hands, ashamed. Morgan's voice softened, heavy with raw feeling. For weeks, that man met my daughter in secret. No payment, no title. He asked for nothing. He was patient, kind, guiding her toward a way out of the silence. She drew a breath, her eyes shining. At this moment, she was no longer a CEO. She was a mother sharing a miracle. So, to answer your question about my judgment, Trevor, she said, her voice husky with emotion. This morning, thanks to that man's kindness, my daughter spoke her first word in a year. She looked at me and said, "Mom." A collective sob rolled through the hall. The silence shattered, replaced by a swelling wave of feeling. Then one person clapped. Then a second. Within seconds, the entire room was on its feet, applause thundering like a storm, a roar of support, empathy, release. The applause was not for the CEO, it was for the mother. Trevor Banks stood frozen in the aisle, wearing a mask of horror. The public execution he had plotted had turned back on him. 2 security guards appeared quietly and escorted him out of the auditorium without a word. Through a blur of tears, Erin watched Morgan at the podium, letting the applause wash over her. When the sound finally ebbed, she delivered her final announcement. Effective immediately, Sequoia Bay Capital is establishing the Maya Voice Fund, providing trauma care and speech therapy to children free of charge. Her eyes found Erin's once more, containing a promise, solid as stone. And I have found the perfect person to lead it. When the chaos subsided, she met him in the empty lobby. The late sun poured in, pulling long shadows across the stone floor. "So," she said with a small, tired, warm smile, "Executive Director, the job is yours, if you want it." "Morgan." Erin's voice thickened. "After everything you just said, You don't need to say anything," she cut in gently, stepping closer, closing the last inches between them. "You healed my daughter, Erin. And I think, perhaps you healed yourself a little too." "You healed me," he whispered, suddenly realizing it was her faith he could never grant himself. She lifted a hand to his face, her thumb brushing away a tear he hadn't known was there. "Their joke was funny in a way, wasn't it?" she murmured. "They tried to pair a janitor with a CEO. And what happened?" His heart pounded. Her smile flared bright. The janitor saved the CEO and her daughter. The first kiss was soft, tentative, a question and an answer in the same instant. Not the ending of a workplace drama, but the beginning of a love story built on kindness, trust, and a faith that does not waver. 1 year later, the Maya Voice Fund looked nothing like a corporate office, and even less like a sterile clinic. The reception was painted warm yellow and gentle blue. In the corner sat a giant beanbag shaped like a friendly monster. The walls held not corporate art, but children's drawings, riotous, messy, free. In a quiet, sunlit room, Aaron Reyes sat on a stool, his back to the door. Opposite him, a wide-eyed, fearful boy, hugged a pillow. 2 months earlier, he had witnessed a car accident, and since then, he had not spoken. Aaron didn't speak. He simply took a lump of green clay and rolled it in his hands. He shaped it into a long snake, then flattened it, rolled it into a ball, then poked a hole. 10 minutes passed, the only sound the gentle rasp of clay. At last, the boy pointed at the clay, his first gesture of the session. Aaron smiled, broke off a piece, and offered it. The boy hesitated for half a beat, then accepted it. That was how beginnings looked. Aaron left the fund at 5 o'clock, sharp. The man he used to be would have worked himself to exhaustion, but the new Aaron had a more important appointment. He drove not to the cramped old apartment, but to a warm house in the tree-shaded suburbs, with a yard and a swing set. He stepped inside to a chorus of giggles. Following the sound, he found Morgan sitting cross-legged on the floor, hair loose, sleeves pushed up, building a Lego castle with Isla and Maya. "Dragon attack!" Maya squealed, launching a red Lego dragon. "Princess Isla, you have to save us!" "Do not fear," Isla declared in a stage voice. "My magic knight will protect the castle." She lifted a slightly crooked Lego knight. Morgan looked up at Aaron, her face alight with an easy happiness that had become familiar. From 9 to 5, she was still the razor-sharp CEO. But at home, she was simply Mom. She had learned to build firewalls, not just for company data, but for family time. She understood the most precious asset was not a portfolio, but an empty Saturday morning. "My magic knight is here," Aaron laughed, bending to kiss her. Isla and Maya shrieked in unison, abandoned the castle, and wrapped themselves around his legs. He scooped them both up, one child in each arm, marveling at the simple, perfect weight of his life. He had a home. He had a purpose. He had a family. The ghosts of the past had finally gone quiet. A few weeks later, on a warm autumn afternoon, they were married. No grand hall, no press, no 100-person guest list. The ceremony took place in the backyard, beneath an old oak. The only guests were their 2 girls. Isla, the bridesmaid, held a bouquet of wildflowers she had picked herself. Maya, the ring-bearer, clutched a small velvet pillow with 2 simple rings. For a year now, she had not stopped talking, her chatter the cheerful soundtrack of the household. Aaron stood facing Morgan, their hands entwined. She wore a simple, elegant cream dress, a white rose in her hair. "Once, I told you I wasn't a healer," he said, his voice thick with feeling. "I was wrong. You healed me, Morgan. You saw me when I was invisible and reminded me of who I am. I love you." Morgan's eyes shone. "I used to think strength meant being untouchable, needing no one. You taught me that true strength is daring to be vulnerable, to let someone in. You and your daughter walked into my life on its cruelest night and turned it into its finest gift. I love you, Aaron Reyes." They kissed. The 2 girls cheered, tossing wildflower petals into the air. That evening, the 4 of them lay on a blanket in the yard, watching the first stars appear. Isla and Maya nestled between them, warm and drowsy. "You know," Morgan whispered, her head on Aaron's shoulder, "it's funny. Trevor Banks once tried to stage the most humiliating night of our lives." Aaron smiled at the peaceful sky. He remembered the cold restaurant, the mocking laughter, the crushing weight of shame, now a story from another lifetime. "And what happened?" he asked, their well-worn refrain of happiness. She threaded her fingers through his, her hand warm and steady. "He accidentally introduced me to my husband. And that is how a cruel joke became the most beautiful love story San Francisco had ever known. Sometimes the worst moments open the door to the best ones. Sometimes the people we think are invisible are the ones who truly see us. And sometimes, just sometimes, love begins with a sugar packet and the belief that everyone deserves to be seen. Thank you for staying till the end of the story. If this video touched you even a little, please hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next episode. Leave one word that describes your feelings in the comments. We're building an emotion map for the channel together. What do you think the characters should do at the next turning point? I read every single comment.